write 0.3 as a fraction. So 0.3 as a fraction. So if people are not super clear about this topic, basically again it's the topic which is fraction, but then again some people might get a little bit confused or might get tricked or mess up the numbers a little bit. So let me make it clear for everyone by taking a very simple and small example so that you can relate to this question and then answer it more confidently. So for example, if we take 0.003 for example, adding more zeros in, what do we really need to do here now? So as we know, when there is a decimal point, you need to count how many points that you go through here. So like in the middle of them. So 1, 2, 3 till you get to the end. So as I was solving, you notice that I went 3 steps, meaning that I went through 3 whole numbers which are after the decimal point to get to the end. So I know I went through 3, which simply means that firstly, this number is something that should be noticed. So after 0, we know it's a 3. So we always know that the numerator is going to be a 3. Could be a 2, 1, 0. Could be a 2, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7. But it will always be shown here. So this is the number that you need to write always as a numerator. And in the bottom, as we went through 3 numbers, 3 digits, that will be 1. 1 is considered as only 1, nothing else. This is something that you need to write. After that, we know we went through 3 digits. That will be 3 zeros for those 3 digits. And that's simply your answer, which is 3 over 1,000, which is the solution for 0.003. So I hope this method is clear to you. If it is not, I can always explain it again in a more, in detail in a short. So please let me know if you want me to explain this. I'll be very happy to explain it to you. And would be able to give you a few sums that you can do by yourself, and then we can always discuss them at the end of the video. Okay, so we know 0.3, which is a very similar question to what I explained. So we know that this only went through 1 point to reach the end, which simply means that you write 3, you write your line, which is your upon 1. It went through 1 digit, basically means 1 0. This is your answer. 3 over 10 is how you basically got 0.3 in a way. That's your answer. You gained a mark. Moving on to the next question. Work out 3 to the power of 2. So what does it mean when there is a number above? That simply means a power. That simply means that you have to multiply a certain number to the number of times which is present in the power. So suppose now we know a number is a 3. What do we notice? We notice that it is to the power of 2. What does it clearly mean now? That we have to multiply 3 by itself 2 times. Because as you can see the power, it mentions that it is a 2. Clearly means that you will multiply 3 2 times. So 3 into 3 simply gets you an answer of 9. So your answer would be a 9. You gained a mark. Again, very simple. It is again very much acknowledging the very basic concepts of topics such as fraction and topics such as multiplication and powers. So here we can see it was 3 to the power of 2. Again, if there was an example of, for example, 3 to the power of 3 would basically mean to multiply 3 times. So 3 into 3 into 3, which would be simply 27. Right. And most importantly, it is very much important for them to know your answer because they told you to work out. This is a very much keyword that you can underline in the examination. As soon as you see it, you know that you need to work out the answer. So if you write, for example, 3 into 3, you won't gain a mark. But the examiner will think that, oh, that this person has acknowledged what this question meant. But again, the answer is very important because again, this is what they're really asking for. They're not asking for 3 into 3. They're just simply asking for an answer. And here it is very simple and it's not super critical and it's not that problematic that I'll lose a mark if I just write a 9. As it is only a 1 mark question and it is at the very much start of your examination. So they won't mind you writing an answer of simply 9. And if it makes you feel better, if it makes you feel like, okay, I need to show my working as well, don't spend too much time on this, but simply write 3 into 3 is equals to 9. Your answer is 9. and don't do too many other calculations, because this is a very simple topic. It only needed a simple recognition of to what power it is done, first of all. Second step, what does it really mean then? 3 into 3. And then what is 3 into 3? Which is your third mark, is your answer, which is a 9, which is basically for which you got a mark. Right. So for the next one, now here it can be a little bit tricky. This is where it is a very important note, no matter how many other steps you've done, super important for the people out there to know that they need to follow the BODMAS in this, always. These questions are meant to be given to you so that you don't find it tricky, and you need to be very much familiar with BODMAS. What is a BODMAS? BODMAS is something that you need to follow all the way through mathematics. There will be a lot of questions related to this in your examinations. Even in higher, you'll get a few questions related to this, and it will get you tricked sometimes at which ones to do first, which ones to not. So it is very much important, and a very helpful thing to do is to write BODMAS in your list, or in your rough column, you make a line, you write BODMAS. Very helpful. So from that, you will know that which steps to do first, which step that you have to do later. In BODMAS, we simply know this is a bracket, the B, the O is off, the D is divide, the M is a multiply, the A is an addition, and S is a subtraction. Here we can clearly see that firstly they've given us 20 divided by bracket 3 add 2 bracket closed. So now what do we need to do? See now. As we know, the first and foremost, we check divide is the first sign given in this question. But is it given as a first sign in the BODMAS area? No, it is not. It is given as a third. Okay. Let's see next. Now we have a bracket 3 plus 2 bracket closed. Is there a bracket in the front? Is it before division? Yes, it is. What does it mean? That firstly, we need to solve the brackets. So if we solve that, we clearly know, we just write 20 divide as it is. We solve the bracket, we know it's a 5. Now we can clearly open the brackets, they don't have to be closed. We simply write 20 divided by 5. We divide 20 by 5, which is basically a 4. 4 is your answer. Very simple, but again can be tricky sometimes if you're not familiar with BODMAS. BODMAS is something that you need to be familiar with, as there will be a lot of bracketed up questions, and it is super important to acknowledge all of it and then understand which steps do I need to do first and what later. Just don't get confused and, oh, this is the first step, means I have to divide first. You have to write BODMAS and then acknowledge, okay, there is a divide. We know it's the third step, that's fine. There is a bracket after that. That means we need to solve the bracket first because it is first in the list before division. So we do bracket first, then we do division. And in that way, we can get the perfect answer and gain that 1 mark successfully. Okay. So now for this question, we've given that write down a factor of 60, which is between 8 and 14. Okay, so basically they are saying that we need to write a factor which is basically between 8 and 14, not below, not above, in the middle. So so the numbers could be 9, 10, 11, 12 and a 13. You can also write these down if you want to. It's a 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. Only these numbers are valid, which will be a factor of 60. But which ones? Let's find those out. So when we need to write a factor of 60, we can start with 1 multiplied by 60. Then we can write 2 multiplied by 30. 3 multiplied by 20. 4 multiplied by 15. This is basically the factors. By factors I mean this is what we can write to acknowledge that if we multiply these by this number, we get a 60. So we know first we start with 1. What do we multiply by 1 to get 60? We multiply 60. what do we multiply by 2 to get a 60? We multiply 30. So we multiply 2 into 30 to get a 60. So for 3, what do we do? For 4, what do we do? It's very similar steps to 1 and 2. And then we write for 5, multiply by 12 gets us 60. And then we know 6 into 10 also gets us a 60. Now in these steps, we need to determine what will be the factor of a 60, which is between the numbers 8 and 14. So as we know that 1, 2, 3, 4 are the numbers which are quite bigger than the numbers 14. Because when we look at the number that is multiplied by, because they are also known as the factor of 60, we know that these numbers are very much bigger than 14. So we leave all of them out. But when we look at numbers 5 and 6, what are they being multiplied by? Which are there again factors. The factors are much smaller than 14, but also fitting in the category of being older than 18. So basically being in the middle of 8 and 14. Simply means that these two numbers, 12 and 10, would then be the factors of 60, which are between the numbers 8 and 14. So the answer for this would be 12 and 10, and that's it. This is how you would gain 1 mark. Moving on. Okay, so now this is the algebra question. A lot of people are familiar with this. Most people are familiar with this. If they're still not, I'll be helping you to introduce to this topic and would help you solve this question and how to gain 1 mark in this question. Right. So if we start now, it simply says simplify 3 into W into 5 into T. How do we solve this? So we can get the like ones together. So firstly, your first and foremost stage should be, if you want to make it a much more like simpler and more solved step to make it easier for you to understand, it will be as simple as we can bring 3 into 5, the only numbers, and then multiplied by the other numbers, which are basically W and T. So we know alphabets are at one side and then the main numbers are at the other side, so that it is easier for us to multiply and get an answer. We know 5 into 3 is a 15, and we know W into T would simply be WT, which simply means again that your answer by multiplying this would not be some other number, it would simply be them are being attached together, 15 WT. And we would write this answer 15 WT, and that's a mark scored. If you again didn't understand, let me give you a small summary. What we really did is we got the like terms together. Like terms meaning the ones which are similar, the ones which are easier to multiply or divide. So we got the alphabets to one side, we got the numbers to one side. We multiply 5 into 3, which is basically 15. We multiplied W into T, which is basically WT. And then after that, now we know that we've got 15 into WT. We would simply attach them, as it would be super confusing to multiply it into WT as it is no multiplication to be done. Otherwise, it would simply and always, whenever you're multiplying a number with the alphabet, it would very simply be them being attached together, 15 WT. And that's how you would earn a mark. This is done in the simplest way possible, but even if you simply write 15 WT, or if you write 5 into 3 W into T, and then you do these whole steps as well, that's completely fine. You can earn a mark in both ways. Right. So, for this question, now it is a 4-mark question. Now this is something we need to pay a lot of attention to. So when we see this question, we see that Faye is planning a trip to a theme park for 1 adult and 2 children. These are the costs for the trip. So we know that the total cost of petrol is £23. The tickets to the theme park is £33 each adult and £24.50 for each child. And the meals, it will be £15 for each adult and £10 for each child. Now Faye has £200 to spend. She pays for all costs. How much money does she have left? Okay, so for this question, we simply read this question one more time and acknowledge. Now I'm going to give you around a minute or so to read through this question and write down anything that you understand and anything that you feel like you need to multiply, or any steps that you already know to write down, and then we can discuss this, as people can take this in very different ways. It could be as simple as a divide question or a multiplication question. I want you guys to write down your main ideas, and then we can solve this together and see if it is right or wrong without me firstly explaining this to you guys, as I want you guys to firstly go through it and understand it in your own way. So I'll give you guys a minute. Okay guys, now it's been a minute. If you want to think more about it and if you want to solve it yourself for this one, you can always pause this video and solve and check and move on to the next question in this video. So now, as we know, for this question, it is very simple. So for the main question that you really need to put attention on is there is one adult. So there is one adult, two children. So as we simply know, total cost of petrol for both one adult and one children is simply £23. Nothing too extra in it, nothing to think about. Tickets to the theme park. So when we know it's 33 each adult, we simply know that there is one adult. So for one adult, it will obviously stay for it to be £33. Unless there were more than one, then we would do a different method, which is again multiplication. If it was 2, then we would do 33 into 2. So we'll get the price for 2 adults to the theme park. But here, we know that there are 2 children. And here they say that for each child, so only for one child, they're telling us that the price would be £24.50. So if for one child, it is £24.50, how much is it for 2 children? We would simply do 2 into 24.5, which would simply give us 49. Which is again simply the price of how much it will be for 2 children to go to the theme park. So we got the price for the theme park for 2 children and 1 adult. Clear? Moving on to the next one, when it comes to meals. Again, we see the first point, which is for adults. So £15 for each adult. We already have one adult, so for one adult, £15. It's clear. Nothing to solve here, nothing to think about here. Moving on. Now if we see again, there are £10 for each child. So they have only mentioned it for one child, and we have 2 children here. So for one child is £10. So how much is it for 2 children? We would again simply do 2 into 10. Simply gives us £20, which will be the price for the meals of 2 children. Now we've got all the prices. We've got the price for the petrol, we've got the price for the children, we've got the price for the adults, for the tickets to the theme park and the meals. Now in overall, we know that Faye has 200 to spend. Now she already had her pounds, she had 200 to spend, and she pays all the costs. So she paid for everything here. How much money does she have left? So we know the total is a £200. So how much money does she have left out of those 200 after paying for all of this? So firstly, the simplest method here, the first step, is to add the prices of these. So we probably knew that for every one, it was 23 pounds. It was basic, it was common, so we wrote cost of petrol 23. Then we had the adult price 33 already for the one adult, so 33 for that. Then we had 15 pounds for the meal. We can write 15, that we already know. Then we can add the prices for the children that we have been given for 2 children instead of 1. As it is clearly mentioned that it is for 2 children, it is important to write the new value that we've calculated. And if we simply write for each child, you might get the wrong answer, because the main answer, the more accurate one that we're looking for, is for 1 adult and 2 children instead of 1 adult and 1 child. So we have to write the double value that we've got. We've got 49 as our first value, which is the tickets to the theme park for 2 children. So tickets to the park for 2 children. So we basically write 49, and then we would add up, and then the next one is for the meals. We know we got a 20 for 2 children, so we basically write a 20. Adding these all up, we get an answer of 140. Please don't use your calculators for this, as it is a very, very simple question. And this one should be done in the time conditions, and at the same time, as it is a non-calculator paper, calculator should not be used for this question. So for this one, I got 140 pounds. So when I know for this total, I've got 140 pounds, and my total is a 200, how much is left? So we answer her main question, her key question. You can also underline it while you're looking at it, so that you know that even after doing all these steps, it is not the end. You need to end it with the answer to the main question that they are asking for. So we know it is 200 pounds. She spent around 140. The money she has left is basically 200 minus 140, which simply gives us 60. Meaning 60 pounds is the money she is left with. Now let me tell you, where did we earn 1, 2, 3, 4 marks? Basically, we earned the first mark here for acknowledging that it is for 2 children. So it is important that we multiply both of these values by 2, so that we don't just get a value for 1 kid, but we get for 2 children. As it was already given for each adult is 33 and there was only 1 adult, there was nothing for us to change or worry about. So we always moved on to the kids, and we multiplied 24.5 to 2, and we multiplied 10 into 2 for their meals and tickets to the theme park to get a accurate answer. So we got 49 here, that is a 1 mark. Then we got 20 here, that is the 2nd mark. And then your 3rd mark would be to acknowledge that this is the things that she has spent it on. She had a total of 200. So firstly, we know that she has spent this on all of this. They have given us the total price, nothing missing here. So what we did was add the new values and add the most common values that we already know. So we know 23 was a known value, nothing changed to that. 33 was a known value, nothing changed to that. This was a change, so we don't write this one, we write the new value, 49. So 23 plus 33 plus 49 plus 15, as it was a known value for 1 adult. So plus 15 and then plus 20 instead of 10, as it was asked for 2 children instead of 1. So we write 15 plus 20. We add all of them, 23, 33, 49, 15, 20, which simply gives us an answer of 140. So we know that she has spent around 140 pounds for all of this. Now the next question is that Faye has 200 to spend, she pays all the cost, how much money she has left? So your 3rd mark, firstly, was for adding this all up. This gives you 3rd mark, and then she asks you how much money is it left, which is simply knowing the total, subtracting from the money that she spent on her things. So we basically do 200 minus 140, which gives us 60, and 60 gives you the 4th mark. That's how you earn 4 marks there. I hope this is clear to everyone. Okay, so this wasn't very, it was in algebraic, it was in full of fractions. It was very simply addition, multiplication, and subtraction. Nothing too complex here. But it is also very important, as soon as you see these 4 mark, 6 mark, 5 mark questions, or even more mark, actually, there could be a 9 mark or 10 marker as well. It is important to always underline with your highlighter or underline with your pen, as sometimes highlighters are not allowed. So other than that, use a pen, use a black pen, use your pen that you have got, underline these key points, and then start solving the question so that you know what you are answering for. And in that way, you will be able to write your working in a more clearer way, and will be able to express your working, and at the same time earn good amount of marks, or the maximum marks, or the best full marks, 4 out of 4. Firstly, look at the 7th question. We know that here is a list of 8 letters: B, C, 4 times A, and then B, and then A again. Write down the mode. What do they mean by the mode here? So the mode simply means, so if we just key point this, we know it means the most common. By most common, they mean about how many times that number or that alphabet has been repeated, and we have to write which one of these has been repeated in this whole line, and then we write down the alphabet or the number, and that is simply our answer to write down the mode. That will be a mode. So if we see here, we notice that A has been repeated a lot of times, more than B and C. So simply we know that this would be your mode. So we simply write A here. Nothing to explain, nothing to extra write. You can gain a mark by simply writing A, because there is no specific working needed here. We simply know, just for explaining, I've wrote that mode means most common, and you don't have to write most common, you don't have to underline it or anything, as it might waste some of your time. But again, if it is something that you need to be aware of, you need to be clear of, or need to be something that is remembered and you don't forget while solving it, you can simply also underline this like me and write most common, circle the most common ones, and simply write the answer. That's also a nice way. Anything that feels comfortable to you, and anything that feels like, you know what, I'll straight away write A instead of circling, that's also completely fine. You'll still earn a mark. Okay. Your next question is, one of the 8 letters is going to be picked at a random. B, first part. On the probability scale, mark with a cross the probability that this letter will be a B. Okay. Right. So for the probability, we simply know, as they've said on the probability scale, mark with a cross the probability that this letter will be a B. So how do you know that this letter will simply be a B? As we know that this is the most common times, we know that this would be an answer of 2 by 8. So for this one, we're going to simply write firstly 2 by 8. And then our next question is, find the probability that this letter will be a C. As it has been repeated only once, we will simply write it as 1 over 8. So if I put it into more simpler explanation of why did I get 2 over 8 and 1 over 8, we know that if we count this up as a total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we know there are 8 digits in a way written, like 8 alphabets written. Not 8 different alphabets, same alphabets, but 8 times written. So we notice that this has been written 8 times. So we know that even if it's writing as a probability, we know out of these 8 times, 2 times there has been a B. So we simply write 2 over 8. Now they're asking the probability that this will be a C. We know that C has only been repeated once out of the 8 times. So we simply write 1 over 8. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Okay. So for the next question, we have algebra. So when we see algebra, as this is something that it was before as well, I think it was in the first couple of questions, in the first 4 questions. algebra is going to be super common in these exam papers. It will either be, it will mostly, I think most probably it will be in your non-calculator papers, but this is not something to put a lot of focus on because it is always important to be ready even for a calculator question, because it might get complex and they might ask you these algebra questions into these 4 mark, 5 mark, 6 mark, 3 mark questions in your calculator paper as well. So it is always good to be aware, and it is always good to look out for earning the most marks, even if it is as small as a 1, even if it is as small as a 2, you're still earning full marks full time. Whether it is a calculator or a non-calculator, you need to be confident in both ways to solve algebras. As most commonly, it won't be like, okay, it's most common in all calculators and only come up in non-calculator. This is not the way I'm saying it. I'm saying it like there will be a more probability of having algebra questions than any other topic. Like ratio is very, very common, and calculator paper, non-calculator paper, in a very similar way, you are going to have algebra questions as well in a similar way. And there are going to be a lot of questions in your calculator paper, non-calculator, which will be full of algebras. So it's always important to have a good practice of it in the non-calculator and calculator paper and earn the most marks, whether it is a 4 marker, 5 marker, 6 marker, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now when we look at question 8, we know that they say a part of question 8, solve m minus 3 is equals to 4. Okay, so this is simply finding m. Now we know 4 is a subject. We don't need it as a subject because we're finding m. So what we do here is that we know that there is a minus 3 in front of a m. Like next to a m, there is a minus 3. So it is bothering m. So what do? We put minus 3 on the other side, and as soon as it is on the other side of the equals to, the sign will change. So as soon as it changes, we write m is equals to 4 plus 3, which simply gives us a 7. So our answer would be a 7. Moving on, our next question is 3n plus n is equals to 24. So when we see algebra, we know that 3n plus n is a 4n. Now please don't confuse this with 3n plus n is equals to 3n squared. This is something that everyone makes a mistake on. 3n plus n is a 4n, not 3n squared. You know why? Because firstly, when we add, we're looking at the number here, which is 3. And we know to 3, they're adding another one. They're adding another n. So we know it's a 4n. N squared basically means that you are multiplying n into n. That would simply give you an n squared. So even if it's not 3n, and if we take it n plus n, that would still be a 2n instead of a n squared. But when it is n multiplied by n, then we know it will be a n squared. Because that also simply means relating to a squared power topic, that n squared is basically n into n, any alphabet into alphabet, any number into number. So n into n would be n squared. But n plus n would always be a 2n. So now when we look at this question, we can simply see and know that firstly, the first ever step would be 3n plus n is a 4n. And we've written that already, so that will be a mark. So now when we write 4n is equals to 24, we know that 4 and n, how are they together? They are together by multiplication. So we know 4 into n is equals to 4n. So if we need to leave n, what do we need to do? We need to put the 4 on the other side. And what happens when we put 4 to the other side? It is the opposite sign. So if this is in multiplication right now, 4 will go into a division. So n is equals to 24 over 4 due to which n will be equal to a 6. And that will be your answer. And this step will gain you the second mark. So basically now you've gained 2 whole marks. Okay. Moving on, question 9. So for this question, now we see that we've been given an angle. We've been given an angle of 70, and we've been given an angle outside and marked inside as a y degree. Find the value of y. So as soon as we start noticing, we notice this circle, right? When we notice this circle, we realize that the total of this circle will always be a 360. So when we know it is a 360 and one part of it is already given to us, which is a 70, what would be the whole? What would be this whole then? They're not asking for this particular part. They're asking for a full. So when we already know that one part of it is a 70, then what is the other part? The whole of it. So then what we do is we do 360, which is a total, minus 70 degrees, which simply gives us 290. And that will be your answer, 290 degrees. Give a reason for your answer. So angles around a point add to 360. How is that going to be an answer? Because angles around a point. Now this is an angle, and around a point we have angles everywhere. They're not marked, but they are everywhere. It's not just y. There could be any other angle here. We could literally cut this one in a half. We know this is going to be an angle. This is going to be an angle right here, this part. All of these are angles. So we're basically saying even if it's in a circle, which is basically in a circle, so around a point they mean by the circumference of a circle. Because when we circle through this, we know that it creates into a circle like that. So basically, in the most simplest of sentence that we need to write, when we see a circle and when we know that this is the answer and this is how we're going to do it, like this example that we just did, we can simply say that angles around a point add to 360. Because this is something we have acknowledged. This is something that they need to know that, okay, this is what made them realize that we had to do 360 minus 70. So we basically write angles around a point add to 360 degrees. Perfect. That's a mark. That's a mark. You gain 2 whole marks for question 9. Perfect. Moving on here. We are on question 10. So question 10 says, a shop sells jars of coffee. Each jar of coffee costs 4 pounds. Michael has 23 pounds. So work out the greatest number of jars of coffee Michael can buy. So this is again a very simple question. Now this is something to be taken literally by imagining it. Okay, there's a guy named Michael. He has 23 pounds. He's in this coffee shop. It is on the cost of 4 pounds. He has already 23 pounds, which is way more than 4 pounds. How many times can he buy coffee? So for this one, we can do a very simple method. It can be a little bit long, but this will be very, very helpful. And it will gain you full mark. So what you can do here is basically, so suppose if we multiply 4 into 1, we take this cost. So we take this cost. We do 4 into 1, 4. You can only buy around 1 from it, like 1 cup, like 1 jar of coffee, I mean. Then we do 4 into 2. Then we know we can buy around 8. 4 into 3, 12. 4 into 4, 16. Now till here we can see that all these numbers are less than 23. So even if we buy 2 cups, 3 cups, 4 cups, we would still be left with a certain amount. And in that way, we won't be able to spend a full of 23 pounds and know the exact value of how many jars of coffees that we had to buy. So we keep going. So now we're on 4 into 5 is a 20. 4 into 6 is a 24. 24. So now we know that we've come to the last value, which is greater than a 23 pound. So we basically know that because 23 is 1 less than a 24, Michael cannot buy 6 cups or 6 jars of coffee. So if this is too much, we look at the previous value. So we know that if we pay 20 pounds, then at least, no matter how much less we're left with, because that's probably the least we'll be left with, because after that, we're basically left with nothing in a way. Because they're asking for a pen more, and we don't have a pen, we only have 23 pounds. Right? I'm sorry, they're basically asking for a pound more, but we don't have a pound more, unfortunately. And it's 24, it's bigger than a 23, so definitely means we cannot buy 6 jars of coffee, which simply means that we can buy at least 5 jars of coffee for 20 pounds. Because if we go less, then it wouldn't make sense and leave out more money. And they are saying what is the greatest number. So now we know that the greatest number of jars of coffee that Michael can buy is 5. So our answer would be a 5. First mark would be for acknowledging to test out all these methods to get a simpler answer of, okay, this is 24, more than 23. Michael doesn't have enough money. We go back and see the greatest value he can do it in. First mark on there. Second mark on there is we know if he can buy with 20 pounds, how many cups can he actually buy? How many jars of coffee can he actually buy? So we see that it's a 5. So we clearly know that it's going to be 5 jars of coffee that he can buy, which is again the answer, the main proper answer to the greatest number of jars of coffee Michael can buy. That will be your second mark. And in this way, you can earn 2 whole marks. Perfect. Now if we move on to the next question. In a sale on Wednesday, jars of coffee are sold at half price. Michael thinks that he can now buy exactly twice the number of jars of coffee for 23 pounds. Is Michael correct? You must give a reason for your answer. So for this one, he says that Michael thinks he can now buy exactly twice the number of jars of coffee for 23 pounds. Do you think Michael is correct? Now firstly, we have to test this out in a bit of a numerical way, not making this super long. So if we think that it is 2 pounds, so basically if we think that it's 2 pounds per jar, we know that he cannot buy the same number. He can't buy the exactly twice the number of jars of coffee, because we know that 2 into 11 is a 22. Which is not the double. So we can clearly say with this like a small experiment and like a small tryout, and by the small solving, we can simply say that he can now buy 11 jars for 22 pounds. So no, he is not correct. So now we're on question 10, and the questions which will be left now till will be the questions. Like the last question will be a 26th question. So I hope you stay tuned for that one. It'll be in the next video. And I hope you like this video. I hope you're clear with all the topics. If there's any doubts, any specific topic that you want me to explain through a short video after I complete this question paper, please let me know. And if there's any past paper that you want me to complete after this one, please put the link down in the comments below, and I can look through the paper, answer it, and explain you as much as I can with new topics, exam techniques to get you the maximum marks in your exams. Thank you so much.